Hey everybody, Colonel Steve Akley here at my place, the ABV Barrel Shop in St. Louis, Missouri. We are here to sell you single barrels. So we're bringing a lot of new things into the state. We have a lot of exclusive things that you can't find anywhere else. So I'd encourage you to come by and check out the ABV Barrel Shop. If you're ever in the area, say you're coming to St. Louis to visit family, or you're on a business trip, or you're just passing through, swing by and see us. We're right off the highway, right off the Interstate 55, so a very major thoroughfare here in the St. Louis area. It'd be real easy to come by and see us. Love you to do that. You can try before you buy here, which works out really great. It takes the risk out of buying single barrels. Well, we've got a fun one today. I told you if you'd send in your questions, I would answer them. Look at this. Questions that were sent in, very fun stuff. Most of them were taken directly from that video. I had one that kind of kicked it off that kind of got me thinking about this idea, and I didn't respond to it out in the video that it was posed in, and I thought it'd be good to do the question video, and that's how we got here. So Hunter Ed is the guy who got this thing started. His was, do you have any bunker whiskey? And if so, what kinds of whiskey do you bunker? To me, there's different definitions, right? Your collection is everything that you have. Some people think that collection means it's just display items. It's not. In my mind, the collection was always everything that you have. Bunker items are items that you buy multiples of that you put away for some reason or another. Maybe it's items that you're going to be trading. Maybe it's some of your favorites. So those are, bunkered because they're backups that are eventually meant to be consumed. So in terms of what do I bunker, I don't think that I really actively bunker much anymore. Now, back in the days when I was out there buying, going to all different kinds of liquor stores and stuff like that, I would probably answer yes. I absolutely, bunker certain whiskeys and things like that. And I don't know, it's different things over the years, Wild Turkey Rare Breed, just because it's a favorite, or Seagrass, I'd see that on sale and I'd buy a bunch of them knowing, that eventually I'll drink all of them, and I did. I don't have any Seagrass anymore. I do still enjoy that one. To me, it's a great summertime bourbon. What else? A lot of different ones. I mean, the closest that I come to these days is Weller Special Reserve. And the idea for that is, in Kentucky, you can legally sell bourbon or trade it at a liquor store or whatever. And the value of that in trade in Kentucky is really high. So they sell it for a couple $100 or some crazy stuff if you go to the right stores. And they'll give you trade value in that on something that is overinflated in terms of price, but you can trade it for that. And I do have relatives in Ohio. So my in-laws live there, as well as my brother-in-law. He lives there as well. So more so my wife goes to visit than I do. But when she goes, she picks up some Weller Special Reserve because it is much more readily available in Ohio. It used to be much more than it is now. Even there, it's getting a little bit more scarce, but you can still get it. My father-in-law also likes to go out. He has been a bourbon drinker for his whole life, but he's, just kind of like a Beam and Sprite type of guy. But so Weller Special Reserve at that $20 price mark it is there in Ohio. To him, that's a good bourbon, and he likes the fun of finding them for me. So he'll, when he goes grocery shopping, he and my mother-in-law, he'll look to see if they have it. If they do, he grabs it and then, just holds on to it till the next time we're in Ohio. So that's really about it in terms of bunkering. I have a lot of Weller Special Reserve. I don't know, maybe everybody's like, boo, what are you doing with that? That's really about it. I had a high. My high water mark was 1,600 bottles, and I don't know how many bottles I have anymore. I've been going through and paring a lot of it down. When COVID started, I drank a bunch of the heels, that last drink, in there. I had saved a bunch of those, and sometimes it gets stressful. I'll never have this again, whatever reason, or if I get another one of these, I want to taste it, or I want to hold on to this till I get my next one. I drank through like all of those. So I culled out a bunch of my collection that way. And then I've also just been actively not buying as much because I have the store. I have access to products that come in here. I'm tasting things as they come in. I'm like, you can only do so much drinking, right? So I reserve most of that for time at the shop, tasting various things, or people come in, you want to try something with them, salespeople come in. That's where I'm doing most of my drinking these days, is at the shop and trying things there. So when I go home, I tend to not drink as much as I used to. So I don't need as big of a collection, though I still have a crazy amount. I bet you I've still got at least 1,000 bottles. So I've culled out a lot, but I have a long way to go. I also, a buddy of mine does some graphic artwork for me for the shop and for my company, the ABV Network. I pay him in bourbon, so that helps get rid of some of it too. So as far as actively bunkering, not a whole lot, but a little bit, I guess. Mike Murphy asked, do you take online orders? One of the most popular questions that we get. Of course, we are unique, one of a kind, the world's only single barrel store. We are getting more barrel picks than anybody else out there. We're getting some cool things. We have access like no others. It would make complete sense to be able to send those barrel picks out, but we don't. Legally speaking, we can't for a number of reasons, of course. Legally, we can't ship things via the postal system, UPS, you name it. We can't do that. Our license doesn't allow us to do it. The state of Missouri doesn't allow us to do it. There's all these reasons against it. And I know you can probably give me a list of, hey, I buy from even other places in Missouri. I get that. And I'm not here, I don't want to know them, I don't want to tell on them, I don't want to have anything to do with it. But they are doing things wrong, which, it goes right until it doesn't go right, correct? It goes along well until someone gets mad at you or something like that, or feel like you didn't ship it in time, and then or something breaks, and then a claim's filed, and you say you're not going to pay it because you can't insure things like alcohol because you're not supposed to be shipping them, and then who pays for that? I don't know. It's a whole thing. I wish we could. It makes sense. I get it. But unfortunately, we just can't. And if we do so, we risk our liquor license, and that's everything to us. We lose our liquor license, we are out of business. So unfortunately, the answer is no. If things would ever change on that landscape where we could, we'd jump right in. We'd probably hire someone who could just ship full time, and that would be a job that we would create based out of that legislation. But it doesn't exist, and we can't do it right now. The next question, Jessica Scarin says, do you do subscription sample boxes? Samples of your single barrels. Now, she didn't necessarily say shipping them out, but I guess that would play into this. So everything that we just talked about with Mike there, we can't do that, Jessica. But if you're saying, okay, fine, I'll come and pick them up, that is a different license as well. You can't repackage anything, so you're not allowed to do that. You will get in trouble if you package anything. And again, you can tell me people do it, and I get it. People break the law. People probably sped on their way into work too, and that's technically breaking the law. And I get it. This is like a crime that doesn't necessarily hurt anyone, but it is a crime that does put our license at risk, and we just can't do it. And I've been in trouble for this one time. So, and I used to do, during COVID, I used to do online classes, and I had a group that I would ship things to, samples of stuff, and I was just doing it. I didn't think anything about it, didn't think you could get any trouble for that. I was just doing it. And once we opened this place, I thought, well, I'll do, maybe one of those a month or something. Somebody turned me in right away. They're like, you can't do that. So they're like, you can't do that. Don't repackage anything. Don't ship anything and all that. So I don't. I have nothing to do with that. And again, Jessica, great idea. Wish we could, but we can't. Don Knott, my old buddy Don Knott. This is the only one out of everybody who asked questions that I kind of know. And I did meet Don once. He came in here to the ABV Barrel Shop, which was pretty cool. I think it was his 60th birthday. He was taking this epic adventure trip, doing a lot of bucket list items, and this was on that list. How cool is that? And he came in here to the shop. But he wants to know, what do I think works better, a whole barrel or staves? Slam dunk. Whole barrel, staves are trash. Anything that is finished with staves, it can be okay, I guess, and Maker Select, I guess, does it the right way. They have the right environment, and the big staves and how they do it, I guess, is good. I certainly like that product, but I think that staves is often a shortcut that people use that aren't as adept, I should say, as somebody like a Maker's Mark. And I don't think it's done well, and I think it adds, just notes of oak or tannic notes. And so you got to really know who's doing it. If they're going to be doing it right, because it's easy to make a mistake with that. Aging with staves is different than aging in a barrel, and things can go terribly wrong and really mess up your whiskey. And I think that happens more often than it doesn't happen. So I'm just not a stave guy. Darren Shaw asked, what started your bourbon journey and why did you start? So this one, because it is a journey, it's not just a straight line. So I don't have the story of, hey, I decided on this date that I was going to be a bourbon person and start making money at it. It's just not how it worked. I was exposed to bourbon early on. That was the drink of choice in a household that really didn't drink. So my parents really were not drinkers. And if, like, you'd ask my mom today, do you drink? She'd probably say no. And really, she really doesn't. But when I was younger, we used to host a lot of parties. So people from my dad's work, he was a police officer, a lot of police officers and stuff would come over for parties. Or the other thing was family. My both sides of my family were big into family events. This would all implode eventually, but when I was young, both sides would come over for 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day. All of those type of parties were celebrated, and there would always be drinks, and they would be bourbon based. So my dad was not a beer drinker at all. He wasn't, again, a big whiskey drinker by any means. He liked, drinks that basically mask the taste of it, things like a bourbon slush or eggnog or things like that. And but that exposed me to bourbon early on. When I would start drinking legally, or maybe just before I was legal, I would drink bourbon. I would drink Beam. That's what I liked. I thought it was easy drinking. I would drink it often with like a Diet Coke. I liked that, and that's how I started really drinking during college. And I became a person who liked bourbon, and that's what I was known for. I never was a beer drinker. I would get into that a little bit later, and I do enjoy beer now. But so that starts the bourbon journey. One of the big moments, though, on the bourbon journey was in 2000. I had read an article, and it might have been 99 when it started, but 2000 is when I went, in USA Today. This article about the Bourbon Trail, and you can go and you can visit the distilleries and how this is a thing. So I go to the Bourbon Trail, and I had a great time. I had been a bourbon fan, just a bourbon drinker before that. After that, after going through and seeing process, tasting some of the better things that are offered, because it's still set up kind of how it is today, a tour, then a tasting. And I kind of got really into bourbon at that point. I was a fanatic. I wanted to learn process people. I started buying more and different things and unique. And, I hate to be the old guy talking, but, all the stuff that we talk about now, BTAC or Pappy or you name it, I was buying all that kind of stuff, and it was easy to find. There was not any birthday bourbon. All this stuff was readily available, and I was drinking through all of it and loving it. That would, of course, change as this boom would start, and now I can't get it any more than anybody else. So that becomes, a moment, and then the other moment, it starts out a tragedy. The next big thing to happen, I'm this bourbon fanatic, and I always wanted to be a writer, going back to when I was a kid. And my dad passed away suddenly. So I had breakfast with him on December 12th, 2012. Lunch with him. He came up to work. We had worked together for a while, but he had retired. He'd been retired for about 5 years, but he would still come up once a week and take me out to lunch. That happened to be the day he takes me out to lunch. So we have lunch, we talk. Took an extra long lunch that day, thankfully. We just, extended the time that we had together, even though we didn't know any of this is happening, of course. And he goes home and unfortunately has a heart attack and dies, and he's gone just like that. And I reassessed everything in my life at that point. I became a bad employee because I didn't care about my job anymore. I kind of wanted to get out of it, but I didn't know how to get out of it. You're stuck because you're making a salary that you can't just replace by just starting a business. I've got a daughter in college. I have a house that I have to pay for, cars I got to pay for. You're stuck in this life. That's how corporations get you. That's why corporate America sucks. If you can direct your kids to start and not getting into that, because you fall trapped to it, you fall victim to it, and you end up setting up a lifestyle that is supported by what you're making in corporate America, and then you're stuck. So I was stuck. I was as stuck as can be. Become a problem employee, at that point. But one of the other things that I did too is I started writing, because I always wanted to write. I thought that would be fun. I write, and then one of the books I have ends up taking off. It's a bourbon book. I'd written a bunch of other stuff that didn't do any good, but I didn't care because I was a writer. I was excited. I was all self-published. It wasn't like I had to find a publisher. If I could write it, it could be published because I was publishing it myself. And I just love the idea of being a writer, because it's something that I always wanted to do. And, with my dad passing away, suddenly I thought, this is something that I always wanted to do. Don't just keep thinking that I'm going to do this down the road. Do it. So, I end up, writing. And then this book, I do Bourbon Mixology, it's called. And it takes off in like the Christmas of 2015. And it ends up being on Amazon. If you search Amazon, a bourbon book, it's like the number 2 thing on all of bourbon items, and the number 1 book for much of Christmas 2015. It's crazy. There's all these. I had read all these books and stuff like that. I'm selling more books than all these people that are bourbon famous. Your Mike Veaches, your Chuck Cowderys, they're great guys. Now, they're people I look up to, and never saying I could be anywhere near what they are, but for some reason that book struck a note with people and took off. So after that, I decided I wanted to do bourbon stuff. The next step was I was just going to be like a staff writer. I thought, I've got this successful book. I've got a story now. I'm in the world of bourbon. I'm going to be big time bourbon writer, like the Mike Veaches and Chuck Cowderys of the world. And so I sent out 100. My dad, it goes back to what my dad told me. Send out 100, requests and you'll get something. I didn't get anything, not even a response, 0. I batted 0. Like, not one person said, hey, we're not hiring right now. We're not interested in you. Fuck off. Nothing. Nobody said a damn thing to me. Or I did not get a single response. Nothing. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to start it myself. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to continue to write, but I'm going to start this publication called Bourbon Zeppelin. I thought, because it promotes the bourbon industry, Zeppelins promote the bourbon industry. I thought that'd be cool. That's a cool name. It's kind of rock and roll. It's kind of promotion. People don't know what it is. Bourbon Zeppelin. They shouldn't go together, but they are together. And I just thought it was cool. I thought you could also, come up with a Zeppelin type of logo thing. And that's what I did. And my idea was, I'll create a publication that is free. Anybody has access to it. And anybody can write for it. If you send me a query that you want to write for Bourbon Zeppelin, guess what? I'll respond to you, and you get to write for Bourbon Zeppelin. Nobody has to go through what I did. And it's been great. I probably have had 50 writers. And again, sometimes people get into it and they get away from it. It's more work than you thought. Once a month comes up quicker than you think, because when you start writing for a publication, your first 8 ideas, you're all jacked up about it, excited about it. It's new. And then after that, it starts to become a little bit of a grind. You get the email, hey, don't forget your article's due this month. I started writing this publication, and it took off really well from the first issue. I send out the first issue and start promoting it and stuff like that. And I start getting contacts from people like Jim Beam and other companies like that saying, hey, can we get in Bourbon Zeppelin? And we got this. Would you be willing to promote this in there? And I thought, this is crazy. It's like I'm really in the bourbon world now. And Zeppelin's cool. Like I said, I've had about 50 people come and go, but and then I have this little core that's been with me from the beginning, Andrea Holak or Delafane. People have been writing with me forever. We publish now twice a month. We started out once a month. Now it's twice a month. 2 different issues, though, different writers. I don't make anybody write 2 articles a month other than me. So, yeah, check it out. It's on our website at abvnetwork.com. You can check out Bourbon Zeppelin. We still do it to this day, and it is really a good industry publication. So that's going on, I was doing some promotion for that, and someone asked me, what's next? And I said, I'm going to do a podcast. I don't know how, but I'm going to do a podcast. A guy reached out to me, and we ended up starting a podcast. And I kind of went from there. I ended up doing this by myself now. And then I've got this crew around me like McNew and Miss Becca Sue. And, I've had those 2 for a long time. But we've just been doing these 2 podcasts, The Bourbon Show and The Bourbon Daily. And it's been great. It's been, a really great run. It's been a lot of fun through the years. And that's kind of how I got going. That's how I got started in the business. And I had started all of that stuff while I still had my corporate job. And my idea was, my daughter still had 2 years of college left. And I thought, you know what I can do? When this stuff ends, when the college is over, I can look at working full-time in the bourbon industry maybe. I can dip my toe in there, and maybe that's my retirement plan. Well, guess what? Life happens, and they were doing some corporate downsizing. Again, I told you once my dad died, I became a problem employee, and they cut me loose. But I had worked there 20 years, and when a job cuts you loose after 20 years, they give you a nice severance package. And I went to my wife and said, hey, I've got this stuff going. It's taken off, I think. I've got the Bourbon Zeppelin going. I got the Bourbon Daily, the Bourbon Show. I'm still writing my books. What do you think if I pursued getting into the bourbon industry full time? She was like, yeah, you've got this bunch of money right here. Take advantage of it. If it runs out, you got to go back to work. But until it does, see if you can make your way in it. And that was back in, the job thing was 2017. So I lost my job in 2017. Been working solely in the bourbon industry ever since, which is pretty cool. Before that, like I said, I had years before that where I was doing, just on the side, which was kind of interesting. I was really, again, as I became a problem employee, I was working more on this job than that job many times. But yeah, it all catches up to me. And what it did was, I'm glad it worked out. I wouldn't change a thing. If I could go back, if someone would say, hey, we can go back, we can change it. Maybe you can fix things and you can keep that corporate job. I would say, no, don't change a thing. That allowed me to do it as I was comfortable, to build my way up, my recognition while I was still getting paid. And then when the Band-Aid got ripped off, when they let me go, they gave me the severance package, which I wouldn't got if I would have just built it up and just quit. And, it forced me to work scared. So what I always say is, how did I do it? I worked scared. I was always worried that I was going to have to go back to corporate America, and I didn't want to do that. So that was how that happened. All right, that was my journey. That's how we get today. I had the relationships and opened up the barrel shop. My buddy Jim Fosnot and I, we talked about this for a long time because he was the Total Wine barrel guy in St. Louis, and we were picking barrels up to 100 a year for them. And we thought, you know what, we should do something, and that leads to the store opening up. And you got the ABV Network still. We're doing events, podcasts, writing, all that kind of stuff. And then you got the store. It kind of all works together. And each thing that I do seems to help the other thing that I do. So it works out really well. Last question, Chico Maldonado. Sorry if I've said that wrong. But it says, can you discuss tannins, how you identify in oakier profiles, and how do you know if something is over-oaked or tannic? Well, over-oaked versus tannic. Over-oaked is really magnified oak taste. So if you are drinking like a double-oaked, you're going to get more oak on there. And for the most part, those aren't tannic. They're just oakier, and that's not really my profile. I'm not like a double oaked person. I can't say that I hate it or that I've never liked one of them, but for the most part, double oaking isn't a thing for me. And double oaking is two new barrels. A secondary barrel is a lot of times they're putting in a secondary barrel, but it's a used barrel. When you're putting it in two new barrels, which would be double oaked, at least in my mind, it's not necessarily a regulated term, but I think that's the generally accepted definition of that. I would say that that to me tends to be too oaky. Tannic is different. Tannins are bitter. And what I always like to say is, if you've ever had wood delivered to you, maybe they drop it in your carport or your driveway. And in the driveway, if it rains, you'll see the streams. The water will be flowing off of the wood, and then you'll see these streams of black stuff. That's tannins washing out of there. And the same thing goes with your barrels. So, that's why they air season them. They leave them outside. And it's not necessarily what happens with the air, though that certainly plays part of the impact of that. But for the most part, it is the water that's coming on, washing the tannins out of there and removing those bitter notes that end up in your whiskey. Apparently, and I'm not a wine person, and someone could jump in and correct me or tell them I'm totally wrong in this, but there are some wines where you're looking for a very tannic taste. Maybe that just pairs well with the taste of wine. I don't know. I'm not a wine drinker, not a wine expert, not going to pretend to be one, but I know that tannic wines sometimes are coveted. But in the whiskey world, they tend to be shunned. So, tannic, you don't want that bitter taste, and I would say it tastes bitter oaky. And again, if you've never tasted wood, how would you know what bitter oak is? I don't know. It's one of those things that you don't necessarily have to taste, but you can just, by saying that in your mind, kind of get an idea of what it is, or maybe identify a time when you were tasting something that tasted oaky but was also bitter. Now, I have actually tasted bitter oak. So Gary Heingartner is a good friend of mine, and we used to do these classes at Total Wine. And one time when I had him come in and do a class, he said, let's do this about wood. And he brought, different samples of wood, and you had to chew on them. And one was that, wood that had been out, air seasoned, left out in the elements, washed on, tannins wore out, versus new cut oak. And you put both of those in your mouth separately. You put one in your mouth, that one that's been air seasoned, kind of mild, tastes, again, like wood. It's not a good taste by any means, but it tastes like wood. You put that new cut, or the one that has been air seasoned like a year even, and you're getting bitter notes. It's different. It's wood, but it's also bitter. And that's what the tannins are going to add. Have I ever had anything that's been over-oaked too? Chico wants to know. Or, have I ever had something that's been over-tanned? I can't say. I think individual barrel picks, you might run into some of those. I've certainly had some where I'm like, that is, Tanic, but not just like a general product. I can't say go buy this product and it's always Tanic, or this one's even over oaky. But, some people do. Some people too will say like Pappy Van Winkle, if you get the 20 or the 23, they're over oaked. I don't necessarily feel that way. I feel like, they do things okay at Buffalo Trace and they've kind of got it down, but others say that. But I have one that it has been way over oaked, and that's for the Final Reserve. I don't know if you guys remember that one. Buddy Thompson had been Glenmore Distillery, and when that shut down, he had saved some barrels, and he had these just kind of in his possession for years and years. And he decided, I guess, to sell them and they created a brand that was sold for charity. So it was for a good thing, and it was called the Final Reserve. It had been in the barrel for 45 years. This was back in 2017 when it happened. And those sold for $1,800 with all proceeds benefiting the Fraser Museum. Again, a very good thing that happens to raise money for a very well-deserving charity like that. But I tried that, and it was terrible. When people say it's like, chewing on like a termite chewing on wood, that's kind of what it did taste like. It was liquid, but it tasted like liquid wood. It was not good. I didn't like it at all. Would it be a drain pour for $1,800? No. Would it be a drain pour if it cost $18? Yes, it would be one that you would not drink. I think for $1,800, you keep it around and you put it in your collection. You'll be like, you can try that if you like. So that's the one I had. As far as anything Tanic, I think those things that put the staves in them, that's a novelty that is going to add tannins or over oaking. That's not my thing. Those things are terrible. That's a novelty joke item in my mind. Just buy good whiskey. Don't buy anything where they got to drop a stave in the bottle. If that's your brand and that's what you do, it's good on you. I don't want to say anything bad about individual brands, and you may sell a bunch, because there's certainly people who want to do those things. They want to feel like they're part of the process, and that's perfectly fine for that. As far as a fine whiskey that you can brag about based on the taste of the whiskey, I don't think that's necessarily really a thing with those sort of brands. And that doesn't mean they're bad brands. I'm just always in search of, my bourbon journey is seeking out the best bourbons and American whiskeys that have ever been made. Those don't fall under that, so they're not really part of my bourbon journey. So that's my take on all this stuff. Thank you guys for the great questions. I tend to be long-winded. Somebody, I'm sure, in the comments is going to get angry about that. But if you're want to really know the answers, you're fine with it, and you can watch these things or listen to them in the car or do something where it makes some sense for you. So hope you enjoyed. See you.